Rise from 22 million to 40 million by the year 2000. Countries in Africa are worst affected, whereas in Western Europe, the rate of new cases is slowing down.
In Paris today, shocking figures about a deadly disease. AIDS is a silent killer. 90% of those infected don't realize they've got it. And while in Western Europe and America, AIDS is at last declining, in the developing world, AIDS is increasing faster than ever. According to the United Nations report, 30 million adults and children worldwide are infected with the AIDS virus HIV. Experts say rates of transmission have been grossly underestimated, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. They believe that at the present rate, by the year 2000, 40 million people will have the virus. Of particular concern is the huge number of children infected.
Every year, nearly 600,000 children are born with HIV infection because their mother is HIV positive. In other words, they start life with HIV. It's not a surprise that AIDS is wiping out all the gains in child survival that we've had seen in Africa.
The report details a dramatic increase in rates of infection and deaths from AIDS. Last year, just over 3 million children and adults became infected with HIV, and about 1.5 million died from AIDS. This year, it's estimated there will be 5.8 million new infections, with 2.3 million deaths from AIDS. In many countries, usually the poorest, the epidemic is out of control.
We're talking about 16,000 new infections a day, of which 1,600 are occurring in children under the age of 15. That means that we are not solving this problem, that we have to really put more effort and resource into solving what is a world epidemic.
Among young people in the West, AIDS infection is declining. That could occur elsewhere with better education and the provision of condoms for safer sex. James Wilkinson, BBC News.
The new out-of-school childcare clubs will not be used to force single parents back to work, according to the Social Security Secretary Harriet Harman. More than two-thirds of the £300 million investment needed to set up the clubs in every community will come from National Lottery grants. Of his divorce hearing in Cape Town. The case has generated widespread media coverage following the death of the Earl's sister, Diana, Princess of Wales.
Earl Spencer has now taken on a second battle here. As well as trying to ensure his divorce case is not shifted to London, he is taking legal action to stop South African newspapers covering it. He arrived at court this morning having discovered some are ignoring a law that bans the reporting of divorce proceedings within South Africa. But newspaper editors are going to fight for the right to cover the case on the grounds that it's in the public interest.
He's adopted a moral high ground, if you will, in the city. He's become the patron of Childline. He's put in appearances at public hospitals where he's unveiled tributes to his sister, and that in fact has made him a significant public figure.
For Victoria Spencer, the estranged wife, the case here is all about trying not to have the case here. She wants a settlement of close to £4 million, which her legal team believes she is more likely to get from a London court. Charles Spencer's lawyers have responded by saying she lives life for the moment and could not handle that kind of money. And today his lawyers have sought to convince the judge here that even if the proceedings did move to London, it would not necessarily mean a bigger payout for Victoria Spencer. Central to this case is the issue of Charles Spencer's own integrity, though, and the question of whether it will cause what he said after the death of his sister to be seen in a different light. The Earl's blistering attack on the morality of the media after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, is now, his friends say, the reason for the lurid coverage of this case in Britain. Leaving court today, he was at least hoping he could stop that coverage in South Africa. Jeremy Vine, BBC News, Cape Town.
A hospital in Blackburn has been strongly criticised after it released a psychiatric patient who then killed his wife and himself. A report by East Lancashire Health Authority says there were major failings in the system at Queen's Park Hospital, and there should have been more thought before Michael Horner was allowed home.
The report lists a catalogue of errors in the psychiatric unit where Michael Horner was a patient. It was understaffed, it lacked proper management. Mr. Horner's illness wasn't properly diagnosed, and his family and GP weren't told when he was discharged. back to his wife, who he strangled 24 hours later.
There were a number of people directly responsible or related to his care, and each of them, or each of a number of them, made errors in his care. Therefore, it would be difficult to point the finger at just one specific person.
Michael Horner had been violent. His wife Hazel was packing to move away on the day he was discharged. The report lists a 14-point action plan to improve mental health services in East Lancashire. But despite the failings of medical and nursing staff, no disciplinary action or retraining will take place. At a news conference, the Health Trust apologised for the poor care and said urgent action was now being taken to improve mental health services.
We intend to learn lessons from this report. Improvements have already been made over the past 12 months, but we are anxious to make further improvements to ensure that the standard of care is of the highest.
I don't think it's good enough to say, oh well, we were understaffed and the staff were changing over and it was a time of change, as if that makes it all right. I don't have my mum and I want her back.
There have been 30 reports on killings by patients released from psychiatric units in this country in the past 5 years. The two sisters say lessons are not being learned and more deaths could follow. Richard Wells, BBC News, Blackburn.
The time just after 13 minutes past 6. Still to come. Clamping down on the traders who make fortunes from human cargo.
Exposed the speeding fine scam that's been stinging motorists.
And strike a light, dreaming of a bright Christmas at a semi in Wolverhampton.
More than 20 suspected illegal immigrants are being held by Essex police. The Romanians, including 8 children, were found in the back of a lorry early this morning. Their detention came on the day a new unit was launched to target the racketeers who smuggle illegal immigrants into Britain.
At Dover Harbour, a lorry's been stopped following a tip-off. Inside are 51 illegal immigrants. Most are from the Indian subcontinent and will have paid thousands of pounds to the Mr. Biggs the government wants to crack down on. This man has arranged his illegal entry to Europe through an accommodating travel agent in Bangladesh. It's a lucrative business involving detailed planning and a limitless supply of forged travel documents and passports. There's even advice on how to avoid getting caught.
You have to tell them confidently, this is my passport. Yes, my passport. Yeah.
At a news conference, it was revealed that 700 immigrants sent to the UK by racketeers last year were caught. Thousands more are thought to have got in. But a new squad will now target the gang leaders.
These people involved in this type of crime are exploiting people. It is the Mr. Biggs that we're after. It's not the people who are being exploited. They, of course, will be dealt with in the normal way.
Some of the major routes for the immigrants are from the Indian subcontinent, Russia, China and Eastern Europe. They sometimes travel to intermediary countries such as Holland, Belgium and Portugal on genuine documentation, but once there are given forged passports to complete their journeys to Britain. On arrival, they receive more false documents and help to get work. But that work is often poorly paid, and immigrants who spent up to £10,000 on the whole package are left destitute. Welfare groups say any action to stop this abuse is welcome.
Obviously, we want safeguards for those genuine refugees who may use these desperate measures, but overall, the criminal racketeers abroad are exploitative, they target vulnerable people, and we've got to put a stop to that.
Unless that happens, the victims of the traffickers now choosing people rather than drugs as their cargo will continue to suffer, facing the ever-present threat of getting caught. Jane Peel, BBC News.
The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook says Britain will push for the enlargement of the European Union as a matter of urgency when it takes over the presidency in January. He told a conference in Budapest that allowing former communist countries to join the EU would help unite the continent. Mr. Cook is visiting Hungary, Poland and the Czech Republic, the 3 countries likely to be the next to join.
The company that operates the Channel Tunnel says it's reached a new agreement.
The proceedings of the past 2 days have been about bitterness and rancour. This morning's session has been about truth and forgiveness. The fate of the 14-year-old activist Stompie Moeketsi Sepe lies at the centre of the inquiry. In December 1988, he was accused of being a police spy, taken to Winnie's house and beaten by members of the so-called Mandela United Football Club. He was found dead some days later. At the time Stompie was abducted, he was in the care of a Methodist mission run by this clergyman, who today said he'd failed to protect the boy.
And I did not remove him from the mission house and get him to a place where he could be safe. And I think that if I had acted in another way, he might still be, he could be alive today.
Then Verein said he wanted to forgive Mrs. Madikizela Mandela for accusing him of abusing boys in the mission.
I long for our reconciliation. I struggle to find a way in which we can be reconciled for the sake of this nation and for the people that I believe God loves so deeply.
The scenes we've witnessed today take us to the heart of what this commission is supposed to achieve: to bring friendship where there was hatred, reconciliation where there was division, but most of all to help South Africans come to terms with their bitter past. George Alagaya, BBC News, Johannesburg.
And tonight, the former MP Emma Nicholson